And let's chug right along. I don't think this will be as long as the last segment, as we went nearly almost an hour by myself, which is shocking me because usually it's like Brandon and I, Sean and I, Dave and I, we go for hours. But when you go for an hour by yourself, it's usually like, wow, I was talking that long? Like, how could I say all of that stuff? But if you're checking us out on YouTube, make sure to check out my Power 5 predictions before coming into this one. Went through all the Power 5 teams. And if you guys are on iTunes, Apple Podcast, or if you're on YouTube and you have an iTunes or an Apple Podcast account, make sure to rate the Primetime Podcast. Rate and review it. Every 5-star rating really helps us out, gets us into the ears of more people. But let's go ahead and do some predictions. I did them for the Power 5s. Now let's do the playoffs. So a little bit of recap. So the TLDW, the too long didn't watch for you guys on YouTube is, so here's my conference champions. I've got 13-0 Clemson for the ACC, 13-0 Oklahoma for the Big 12, 11-2 Oregon in the Pac-12, Georgia 13-0 in the SEC, and Iowa 12-1 in the Big 10. Other notables I have: Alabama is 12-1. Notre Dame is 10-2. Utah is 12-1. LSU 11-1. Michigan 12-1. And then the Ohio State University 11-1. So I think the simple way to go through this is I'm going to go through it this way. I'm going to give you my 1, 2, and 3 because those are easy. 1, 2, and 3 are locks after the conference championship. Then that fourth team, I'm going to take you back. We're going to talk about it. I'm going to go through everything. And then after I give you that fourth team, obviously I'll tell you who wins the semifinal games and the national championship. So after my regular season plays out and all those records I stated are finished, Clemson will be at number 1. Like, they're going to go undefeated. They're number 1 in the preseason, so they'll stay. Georgia's the next highest rated team. They will go undefeated. Nothing will change. They will be number 2. And then Oklahoma will move up as teams move down. They are undefeated also. So Clemson at 1, Georgia at 2, Oklahoma at 3. They're just going to move up. They're not going to move down by winning games. Then you've got that fourth game, because what's going to be interesting here is the SEC and the Big Ten title games are going to create a situation where we are asking who should be the fourth team. Because if Michigan would have beat Iowa, they would have been 13-0, and they would have been a lock for the 4. And if Alabama would have won, they would have been in, and then Georgia possibly would have been out. So really, it's the Big Ten title game that created this kind of a question mark. If Michigan would have won, they would have been 13-0, and they would have been here at 4. But here's kind of the backtrack that we're going to do. So coming into the title games, this is how I think the rankings are going to fare out. So you've got Clemson at number 1. You've got Alabama at number 2. Georgia at 3. Oklahoma at 4. Michigan at 5. Utah at 6, Iowa at 7, LSU at 8, OSU at 9. And there's a possibility, I will say, that maybe a team like Florida, maybe a team like Oregon, that maybe one of those teams are intermixed here, because I put Iowa, LSU, and Ohio State in that order because out of the 1 losses, Iowa's 1 loss is early, LSU's is in the middle, OSU's is at the end. So that's just how they're going to play out. But there could be like a 10-2 in there, like a Florida intermixed with those teams. But I didn't want to go that fancy, but I just wanted to throw that out. So we know Clemson, Georgia, Oklahoma, they're locked. So out of the ones remaining, we basically have the fight for the 4. And the reason why I listed off those rankings was the biggest discussion we will have is Alabama. Because depending on how close that game is with Georgia, there will be people that say Georgia should be the 4. But then there'll be others that say, no, you're crazy, Michigan should be the 4. And then there's going to be teams that say, no, you're crazy, Utah should be the 4. So out of the teams that I think have a case for this 4th pick, or this 4th slot, I'll say, I'm going to go through the key wins and key losses. After we're done, I'll ask you the question. You guys can comment down below. I'll ask it now. As I'm listing these off, comment down below or hit me up on Twitter. What do you think? What did the team that I picked, is that the team that you would have picked based on the information we have? So first I'll say Alabama. The key wins at Texas A&M, home against LSU. Their notable losses, I'll say notable. So notable wins at Texas A&M, home against LSU. The notable loss is the SEC title game. They lost against Georgia. Utah, the notable wins. They won on the road at USC. They won on the road at Washington. 2 big road wins. That USC one might not be as notable because of the record. So Washington, the big notable. The notable loss, the Pac-12 title game. They lost to Oregon, although Oregon is a 2-win team and won't be fighting for a playoff spot. LSU, they're going to win at notable wins at Texas, home against Texas A&M, home against Florida. The notable loss at Alabama. Then Michigan, notable wins, home against Iowa in the regular season, home against Notre Dame, home against Ohio State. 2, if not 3, big wins. The notable loss, Iowa. Ohio State, notable wins at Nebraska, home against Penn State. Your notable loss at Ann Arbor, they lose to Michigan. And then Iowa, notable wins. They beat ISU. They beat Wisconsin. That might not be notable. That might be in the USC category that I had for Utah. But they beat Wisconsin. They beat Nebraska at Nebraska. They beat Michigan in the Big Ten title game. But then they lose to, or then their notable losses is they lost to Michigan in the regular season. And this is kind of my thought process with this is Ohio State for me is out because with Alabama being at 2 heading into title week, I don't think Ohio State's going to, Ohio State and LSU are out because they're not playing and they don't have that game to boost them up to the 4th spot. So push them out of the way automatically. Then you have Utah. Yes, they have 1 loss, but with the loss coming in the title game, because of where the loss happened, I throw Utah out as well because they would have lost in the title game, and there's no way you're going to lose in the title game and move up from 6 to 4. So that means we're down to 3. And this is where each case is going to be unique because first off, you're going to have Michigan where people are going to say, yes, Michigan did actually the first discussion people will have is conference title over non-conference title because we're going to have 3 teams. Alabama and Michigan are not going to have conference titles. Iowa will. And all of these teams are going to be sitting in the 1-loss category. They're all going to be at 12-1. The thing I looked at is with Iowa, the key wins that they have. ISU, Wisconsin probably isn't that notable of a win. Nebraska and Michigan. The only 2 that were above, ISU and Nebraska were both 3-loss teams. Michigan was the only one that's in the playoff hunt, so 1 playoff team. Whereas Alabama, you've got LSU, and then they lost to Georgia. The other thing with Iowa, too, is how much do you put the rematch in there? They lost in the regular season to Michigan, but then beat them. How I kind of thought about it in my head, maybe this is me trying to get into the committee's head with this, is I think the win over Michigan will be good, but I think that the committee will side with Alabama, and that's who I sided with. I went with Alabama because I don't think that Georgia game is going to be a blowout. If anything, it's like 28-24, 28-21. It's a close game. Not saying that Iowa and Michigan will be a blowout, but the thing you got to look at is Michigan to me is out of these three, the first one that's out. And the reason why I say that is it's kind of the same thing with Utah. You can't lose in the title game and then move up, not down in the rankings. So because Michigan lost in the title game, it was just your one loss came at the worst time. Really, it becomes between Alabama and Iowa. And I think that the committee is going to side with Texas A&M and LSU, and the quality of opponent in Georgia being ranked higher than Michigan, to where Alabama will get the spot at 4. And we're going to have a whole nother situation where, and of course Alabama's in the middle of it again, it's a Big Ten team of, should Iowa get the 4 because they have the conference title? That's the conversation we're going to have. I personally believe there should be a rule that win your conference, but at the same time, I understand when people say conferences aren't created equal. Obviously, the SEC and the Big Ten are more challenging than the ACC and the Pac-12. So, with that being said, my 4 playoff teams are at number 1, Clemson, number 2, Georgia, number 3, Oklahoma, and then number 4, the Alabama Crimson Tide. How I have things rolling out is much like Jalen Hurts' sophomore year. Number 1, Clemson plays number 4, Alabama. And if you remember that year, Alabama got the win. We also, I feel like Alabama, this is a side asterisk, is the committee will play up to the TV ratings, and getting Alabama Clemson for the 4th time in a row? Right? No, 5th time. Yeah, 5th time. Because you had the 2 championships, the semifinal, and then the championship. Right? Yeah, 5th time, I believe. Or is it 4? 4 or 5. Correct me down below. We're basically getting the umpteenth time that these teams have met in the playoffs. They're going to play into that. And yes, Alabama is the 4, beat Clemson as the 1. I know Alabama fans will throw that out, but Clemson was kind of a faux 1 because Alabama lost in that sense. And same thing happened here. Alabama loses to Georgia, and that's why they're 4, not 2. But this Clemson team is not that Kelly Bryant team. This is a Trevor Lawrence-led team, best quarterback in the entire conference, in the entire nation. Clemson gets the win. So number 1 Clemson will beat number 1 Alabama. Then I also have a rematch from the Rose Bowl game with Baker Mayfield, where Georgia will play Oklahoma again. 2-3 matchup. Great game. That was an amazing game heading into the nightcapper with, because I remember those are both, wow, I'm basically saying the playoffs are going to be the same thing as that year. Because that Rose Bowl happened, then Brandon and I watched Clemson, Alabama, and we're like, wow, this one was a dud. But in this one, I've got the outcome being flipped. I think that Jalen Hurts, CeeDee Lamb, we're going to see a high-scoring affair, Fromm versus Hurts. DeAndre Swift is going to ball out for Georgia, but CeeDee Lamb and Jalen Hurts are going to go off. Oklahoma will get the win over Georgia in a high-scoring affair, just like we saw the last 2 times these teams met. So that means in the national championship game, I am going to have number 1 Clemson playing number 3 Oklahoma. Jalen Hurts gets a new team back to the ship, and I've got the Clemson Tigers winning it all. I know it's boring, but they are, to me, the favorite to win this title. and they are going to win the national championship. They're going to beat Alabama in the semis, then beat Oklahoma. Even if it was, I'll be honest, even if it was Clemson, Georgia, I would have picked Clemson to win this game. Let me know what you guys think, though, down below. What's your top 4? Who's your first out? So I'll also do that, by the way. If I'm looking at it, oh, shoot, Notre Dame probably should have been in these two. Yeah, Notre Dame 10-2. So that's why they weren't. So my top 6 would be Clemson, Georgia, Oklahoma, Alabama. My first out would be Iowa, with my second out being... Okay. Yeah, my first out would be Iowa. My second out would be LSU. So that's the top 6. So 5 would be Iowa. 6 would be LSU. Then I've got Clemson over Alabama, Oklahoma over Georgia, Clemson over Oklahoma in the national title game. What's yours? Let me know down below. Your top 6, your playoff teams, why you're thinking that way, and then, of course, your semifinals and your championship game. Let me know all of that down below in the comment section.